You know, I heard this expression a long time ago: ignorance of the law is no excuse. Have you heard that one? And it means just because you didn't know that it was against the law for you to, rob a bank, does not mean that you are innocent when you rob a bank. Or whatever the crime is. Let's think about what it is that God wants and how we might be able to know that whether or not we are fully bought in as Christians, and how we might, live up to it either way. You're at the Takeout. I'm Jeremy Williams, pastor of Community United Methodist Church in beautiful North Muskegon, Michigan. And you can find us anytime at communitychurchumc.org. So drop by, keep in touch. Now, I want to read to you one of my really favorite Bible passages, and it comes from the Gospel of Matthew. And Matthew is different from John, for instance. Well, mostly John. Because Matthew is asking this interesting question: what does God want? And he's not saying you have to believe in Jesus and worship Jesus and say things about Jesus in order to be saved. No, Matthew is saying something quite different. So listen for what he is saying. And if you want to be on God's good side at the end of the whole story, according to this chapter in Matthew, what is it? Here goes, Matthew 25, starting verse 31. It's Jesus talking, and he's sort of talking prophecy. He's talking about some future time when he comes back. He's called the Son of Man in this. When he comes back and judges everyone. So that's a good way to find out what's expected of me. Ask a judge. Okay, so here we go. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he'll put the sheep at his right hand and the goats at his left. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, "Come, you that are beloved by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me." That word stranger could also just as well be translated foreigner. I was a foreigner, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you visited me. And then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly, I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these my brothers and sisters, or members of my family, you did it to me." And the righteous will go away into heaven happy place. And then the opposite story takes place right away, and it's the goats' turn. And they get sent to a bad place, prepared for the devil and his angels. And likewise, they're thinking, we didn't see you. If we'd have seen you, and if we'd have known it was you, then we surely would have done something, because we do have an interest in going to heaven. It sounds like a good idea, but we didn't know it was you, so how could... And it goes badly for them because they didn't care for poor people. Okay, what was the standard again? That was the question before we started. What was the standard for getting in with God according to Matthew 25? What's the criterion for judgment? Or what does God want? Well, the criterion for judgment was what they had done, not what they believed, not what they thought, not how often they went to church, not how often they went to confession, or how often they prayed. It really wasn't any of those things. And that is really a slap in the face to a lot of really churchy people. I'm pretty churchy myself, so it's a little bit of a slap to me too. I mean, I make my living being a church guy, I guess, but I'm still in the God business, and mostly it's not church that ultimately matters. Church is supposed to help us get these things figured out and live into them together. So it's kind of a slap in our face as churchy people, because it says, no, you're putting your energy all in the wrong places. You're putting your energy into making sure you do worship right. You're putting your energy into making sure you have a nice building and pretty sanctuary, and you're putting your energy into making sure you have, an acceptable sermon and a nice music program. You're putting all your energy into these things. Wait a minute, folks, you're doing it all wrong. Oh, maybe you're doing it right, and that's great, and that's fine. I mean, you're allowed to wear what kind of clothes you want. You're allowed to eat what kind of food you want. You're allowed to have the kind of church experience you want. That's fine. But have you helped anybody lately? Now, here's the trick for the story for me. Okay, we know there's sheep, there's goats. Are there any crosses between the two? Are there some folks who are doing some things? And how many things do I have to do? How much of my time do I have to give? Do I have to be like a full-time do-gooder all the time? Or can I just do some things? Do I have to give a tenth of my income? Can I budget this somehow? Are all of us responsible for the same amount of good? I got to say, that's pretty clear. No, it can't be. You can only give according to your capacity, right? And if you're working 2-3 jobs so that you can keep body and soul together, put food on the table, pay the utilities and the rent, then it's going to be hard for you to, support the food truck. Give your $1,000 or whatever it is for that, and then spend time doing this, and then buy food for this, and buy clothes for the clothing thing, and go visit prison. Our system doesn't make all of these things possible for all of us, and so some people have more resources and more time and more maybe health, all the resources, and so we become a little more responsible. We have more money. And so we are more responsible. We're not just responsible for, employing people, paying a living wage. Well, maybe Jesus would include that nowadays. Churches get obsessed with the wrong things. Churches start talking about all of, this is my favorite rule. My favorite rule is about sexuality, or my favorite rule is about abortion, or my favorite rule is about taking the Bible literally, or my favorite rule is about you must affirm this confession or that confession, or you must go to church, or you must tithe, or whatever rule it is. And Jesus doesn't actually name any religious things at all. I think Jesus is just saying, when you are looking at your life, When you are looking at your life, you know if you are giving what you can and what is right. And nobody has to explain this at length. Nobody has to give you big theology. Nobody has to have a conversion moment with Jesus to know that hungry people need food. And yet we've got a world where some people choose to be in complete denial about that. And to say, no, it's their fault, they're poor. No, I don't know, the poor are the poor, but you're responsible for something here. You're responsible for food, for other people. You're responsible for this, for that. You see, this has happened to me multiple times. I've talked about this kind of topic, this kind of passage out of the Bible, this kind of idea about, what God wants out of us. And someone comes up to me afterward and they say, Jeremy, I just feel convicted. I which is church language, I need to do more. I need to step it up. And I know there are more things I could do. And I look at the person, and inevitably it is the person in the church who's doing the most already, who is feeling this strange compulsion, they gotta do more. And there's no limit and there's no end. And really? You are not the one. So I have to give a disclaimer. If you are already the person who is doing the most, I don't know, maybe God is trying to compel you to do more. But maybe you're not the person I'm talking to. I'm really talking to someone else who has been very, very casual, who has not really owned a responsibility for other people, who has not really yet owned that you have an obligation to help other people's lives be better. It is not about you. In fact, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness works best when I support other people's lives, when I acknowledge other people's liberties, and I pursue happiness for other people as well as myself. Then it works best. I don't know what your limit is. I don't know what your boundary is. I don't know exactly what God is asking of you personally. Is God asking of you more right now? Or is God more interested in saying, look, I'm setting a standard before you. The standard is not in numerical terms. You have to serve people this much of your income, this much of your time, this many times. You are required to make this much difference in the world. I mean, face it, if we all did more, then more would get done. But God is saying, you know how much it is. If I read the letter of James, James says, people who are Christian and people who are not, people who are Jewish, people who are not, all are responsible for knowing. They all have a way of knowing what God has in mind. It's not a secret. We can pretend it's a secret. We can pretend God doesn't care. We can pretend it doesn't matter what I do. It does matter what I do. Whether you're Christian or Jewish or Muslim or Buddhist or whatever you are, it matters enormously what you do. It matters to other people. And it matters to God. I'm talking today about the question, what does God want? I don't have to talk about the question necessarily, how much does God want? God wants to work it out with you. And I promise that if you sit down in prayer and put yourself in front of God and say, what do you want out of me? You'll start to feel a compulsion to do more. Now, maybe you and your ability to be compassionate are at max right now. Maybe you are a caregiver And that is taking so much time and energy that you really can't afford, and you can't get out of the house because you are a caregiver. Or maybe you are in a stage of life where you are receiving help, and God is not saying to you, well, by gum, why don't you get off your butt and help me some more? No. This is not to make you feel guilty. This is simply to say, there's this whole category of things that God wants. How about doing those? How about doing those? How about when we have a choice, we give. We support Mission for Area People. We support other opportunities to help people. We help kids learn how to read. He didn't mention that one. How about we go play a game with somebody and make them feel less lonely? Yes. How about we give generously when we can? How about we support our church, but we make sure that our church supports caring for people? How about we do all of these things and then we go volunteer? And I know it's hard right now. It's coronavirus time again still. But how about? What's God calling you to? What does God want? So there's this question. What does God want? Why should I care? Well, the short answer is, what God wants is fairly obvious. God wants good. God wants us to do good. We know what's good. Do justice. Love mercy. Be humble. Yes, that's good. What does God want of us? Do good. Are you doing good? Don't beat up on yourself. I'm not here to beat up on you. I'll make you feel wretched. I'm here to say, keep asking God, and God will keep answering you. What does God want? To step up and share the love in all the ways you can. Go in peace, serve the Lord, enjoy your week. See you next week.